we've moved too quickly, and our brains can't handle it, and then that means we just get absolutely overwhelmed by it all. And then that's when we get to the point of burnout, because we don't know when to stop.
Welcome to the Red Print, your wellness podcast. This is episode 10. My name is Daanish.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Neil.
Today we're going to be talking about the importance of switching off, including how to find a balance between work and home life,
Creating a relaxing evening routine,
and how connecting with nature can give you a different perspective.
Welcome to the Red Print, your wellness podcast.
The idea of switching off, it's something that I just seem to keep reading articles about. Like it keeps on coming up, and especially within the context of coronavirus, post-coronavirus world. Like it's become something that's just so common, and some of that is this blurring of work-life boundaries, that we're finding it increasingly difficult to separate work and home life. I think some of that is also age, in that just the older that we get, relatively speaking, the harder it seems to be able to actually find that space to be able to switch off from work around us. We are so overloaded with information all the time, and we're not used to it, and our brains aren't used to it. And I think it will be interesting to explore some of those ways that we might be able to reduce that, or the way that we can maybe have a bit of a diet of from information overload. So that's where I would come to it from. I've been really interested reading about the particular things that have been going on, and how the current situation has exacerbated it and made it a lot more difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah, so I agree, and I think a lot of the stuff I found is kind of similar. And I think of switching off in a few different ways. And when I think about my own life as well, I think about it in a few different ways, because I think sometimes there's just the switching off in terms of the adrenaline of work, depending on what kind of job you have. So when I've had really intense, stressful jobs, so when I was a supervisor at Starbucks, I found it really difficult to just switch off from the adrenaline of the work afterwards. I just couldn't come down from that, because it was the stress and the intensity. So there's that version of switching off. I think there's also just replaying work tasks and think about the things you could be doing, which I think links to another issue around switching off, which is kind of internalized, this is a political phrase to use, but internalized capitalism, and this idea that we need to be productive all the time. Because I think there's not switching off or finding it difficult to switch off because we've got a lot to think about, and then we've got our phones, and we've got tasks that we could be getting on with. But then on top of that, there's this feeling that we should be being productive all the time, and that we shouldn't be resting, we shouldn't switch off. It's bad to switch off because we should be productive all the time. And I find it interesting when looking at switching off, so many of the articles, everything were from HR organizations and Employee Now and all these sorts of things about getting people to switch off so they can be more productive. So I found that side of it really interesting. So I'll be interested to see what comes out of our discussion today.
I definitely still feel like I am in that sort of realm, that I see switching off actually as something that is a means to an end as opposed to a means in itself. Like I find it something like, if I am able to switch off, then I'll be able to commit to this more, and I'll be so I still see it as something that in itself is a task to fulfill in order to be more productive. I'm absolutely in that place. I'd like not to be, but I am.
I keep on replaying these tasks that I need to get done at hand. It's just going to be a never-ending cycle. So I need an output to that. So let's say, for example, you finished your day, and then as soon as you finish your day, you keep on replaying what you need to do tomorrow or the next day. Break it down for a second. How does that help you in any way?
It's what that allows to do. When you get when something pings into your inbox, or when you see something, or when you read something, it releases dopamine, and it stimulates you. It's the same thing as when, for the majority of our existence, we are hunter-gatherers and we see a saber-toothed tiger. Like, we need to be aware of our surroundings, and we're always constantly looking out for our surroundings, because that allows us to survive. So we're stimulated by the things that are around us, and that allows us to survive, and that's how we've evolved. It's just that now we've got the same brains as we had then, but we've just got loads more stuff that's around us. So every time you hear that, and like the ping that my email gives, I both absolutely loathe it, but I'm also really familiar with how it makes me feel. I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. I have to look at that right now. Like, whatever I'm doing, I could be walking out the room. Happened yesterday. I finished work, turned everything down. Computer was turning off, and as it was, something pinged into the inbox. As I'm walking out the door, have to go back in, have to check it. But I get that feeling of stimulation from it. So we get this like really short-term burst of energy from finding stuff, and it's the same as like, when you're like just scrolling on your phone, and you're just like scrolling down and seeing stuff, and it's like, we are getting something from it. It's just that we've moved too quickly, and our brains can't handle it, and then that means we just get absolutely overwhelmed by it all. And then that's when we get to the point of burnout, because we don't know when to stop. And it goes beyond just the thing of, I just like to do work, or I want to do a good job. It actually comes back to it also being like a physical compulsion to do it that makes it even more important to break it. But I guess when we know that it's a physical compulsion, then it does make it easier to break.
I think I'm a weirdo, because I definitely will experience guilt sometimes for not working at specific times. I think especially Neil, you mentioned earlier about technology, and people work at different times, and people might send an email in the evening. People have got childcare responsibilities and things. People are working at different times, and that's completely fine. But I think sometimes we can internalize that and think, oh, they're working now, I should be working now. And that email's been sent, I need to respond right away. If I don't respond, I look like I'm lazy or I'm bad or things like that. And I definitely experienced that a bit. But at the same time, I'm also very strict about, typically when I'm not teaching, not working evenings or weekends. Like, I just won't do anything. That's just not how I operate. Won't even do marking on evenings or weekends. If it can't be done during the time that I have to work, then it can't be done. And so that's kind of my stance with things. And the things that kind of help me with that are that basically, so my girlfriend comes home about 5 o'clock, and in my head, I'm not going to work when she's around. So if she's home, I'm not working. So I've got that really clear thing in my head that I think makes it a lot easier. That I've got this such like clear marker between what is work time and what is home time. And so because of that, I feel like I don't struggle with that at the moment. Things I have struggled with before is when I was doing the PhD, because when you're doing a PhD, and also when you're just an undergraduate student as well, it's even more blurry, and you could be doing stuff all the time. And then I found it difficult because, like Daanish said, I felt like thinking about it was also a good thing and like good work to be doing, to be thinking about it. And I found sleep really difficult. So I don't know if anyone else has experienced this. So because I would just be, because I didn't need to be at my computer working. I could just be sitting around just thinking. And before I went to bed, I would always be thinking about it. And it was I just got obsessive. And what I found helped me was listening to audiobooks. And still now to this day, I just listen to audiobooks before I go to sleep, because it drowns out the noise in my head, because that quiet time is still a time where my brain wants to go back to work during that moment. So what I do to stop that is I just put on a book. Stephen Fry is talking, can't think clearly.
How do you both find it before you're going to bed of restricting your phone time? Because I find that really, really hard. And especially something like when I'm scrolling, like in the daytime, I'm quite good at not scrolling through. So I feel like in the evening, I'm sort of treating myself. and then that just bleeds out. And there's so many times I'm really trying hard to read in bed, or to, you know, just to do something more that just kind of like relaxes my brain. But so often I find myself scrolling. Do you like stop yourself from doing it? How do you do it? Because I mean, read any article about relaxation, the first thing it's going to be is blue light is bad for you. Don't read your phone before bed. Blah blah. It's like, yeah, cool, but it's hard.
Like, thank you for telling us this. Yeah, I agree 100%. As in, yes, I scroll through my phone as I go to sleep, but I think the last couple of weeks I realized, like, exactly as you said, because I haven't been on it during the day as much, then when it gets to the evening, I'm like, oh, okay, I can now go through my phone as I please. And then with that, I'm not setting any restrictions on myself. And then, as you said, it just bleeds out to like hours and hours and hours. So what I've tried to, what I've done is I put on my phone, I like put all the apps I usually go to like in like a really hard to find place. So like I put it, so on iPhones, you have the homepage and you can make folders, and then I put it in a folder, then I make another page and another page. So I have to like go into that folder, swipe to go into it. So it's not really, I don't really see it, because if I see it, I'm clicking on it. And if I click on it, I go down a loophole, a rabbit hole of just like videos for like, let's be realistic, hours really. So I stopped that through just like telling myself, if I go on this, I'm going to lose an hour or two of my time.
It's interesting actually that we've talked about, our theme is like switching off, and then we have actually gone back to technology and like, you know, switching off our phones maybe, which I would never do. That's, you know, that would be too far for me. In terms of before bed and Neil's question, I think certain apps I find more like enticing and engaging than others. So I'm okay with YouTube, but when it comes to like Instagram and Twitter, that's where I can like endlessly scroll. So I don't do either of those. I'll just like watch a YouTube video. But then once the video's finished, I've got like a hard line, and that's when I'll pop to bed. We've talked about feeling like we need to be productive all the time. How do you both feel about doing things, doing hobbies that might be like completely, you know, purposeless, unproductive? How do you feel about that?
For me, Reese, so as mentioned earlier, like I love cooking. Like since I was young, I just enjoyed cooking. Like, yeah, there's no other reason to explain. I love it. I love it. And then I suppose exercising as well. But then something recent as well, like martial arts. Like, so I started a Malaysian martial arts called Salat. So I've been doing that, and then I've really been enjoying it, because when I have something new, like as much as I like got university work and everything going on, like I love, I suppose what is it, new stimulus. Like I just love throwing myself into it and like seeing, and just throwing myself into it and like trying to absorb as much as I can because it's new.
For the longest time, like, I've really tried to get into mindfulness practice, like meditation, and I really struggle with it. And I don't know, I think part of that is just to do with where my head must be at this stage, but I've really struggled for years. And so for me, yeah, the relaxation and being able to switch off actually comes from the doing aspect, you know, doing a project and taking something. But the one where I don't have to be productive, because all of those projects still require me to be productive. They require me to be learning something, for my brain to be active. The thing that I notice that actually works for allowing my brain to move into a different state is being outside and walking in nature. And I know that sounds like a ridiculous thing to say. I know how it sounds, but it is the one thing, and I'm always reluctant to do it. A bit like exercising, like I'm always like, oh, I can't be bothered. Like I can't be bothered to go and either drive somewhere or walk somewhere. I can't really be bothered. I'd rather just stay at home. So I can never really be bothered to do it, and it always takes me a little while to get into it.
Lovely.
But being outside, and again, I think it comes down to the fact like we are built for this as human beings. We're used to being outside, like we're used to having that kind of stimulus. Like we're not used to being in a city, and we've got there's particular stimulation that comes from being in a city that is very different when you're out, and your brain works differently when you're outside. You're not having to make as many connections as you would do otherwise. You know, when you're in a city, you're seeing lots more people, you're seeing lots more things, you're having to consciously think about where to go and how to move. You don't have to do that when you're walking. So my throughout lockdown, the single best thing was buying the OS map for near the area, and you get a download. You can download the OS maps. And
what is it? OS.
OS, it's Ordnance Survey Maps. So it gives you a map of the entire area, and it will give you various walks that people have plotted out, and there'll be circular walks. So essentially what you can do, you can either plan it in advance, or you can just be like, I want to go to this village looks cool, so I'm going to drive out to this village. I get there, go on my phone and have a look, and oh, there's 10 plotted maps in this village. One is a mile, one's 10 miles, one's 20 miles, and you can just choose to go and walk. And I find for me is that just being out in nature is the only thing that will allow my brain to work differently.
I love that too. I love that you mentioned that, because that's what I do. So in Wales, the rules have always been slightly different, and there's been long periods of time where we haven't been able to drive to walk. So we have to just walk straight from our house if we want to go anywhere. So I have discovered so many places nearby that I never would have seen before, because I've been looking at maps and things. Yeah, you're just speaking to my soul when you say it. It's kind of like hypnotic in a way after a bit.
I think, like, both of you, I agree 100%. When you're outside, it's just like your mind is in a different state. I'm not sure if that would be correct to say. Like, it's just, you're disconnected from everything. Like, I think at one point, like, I used to play podcasts through my walks, and then some of them I didn't play anything. And then when you're just walking and you just like, as you guys said, you're not thinking about anything, you're just walking, going through it. Like, you're kind of disconnecting from everything going on around you. But when you're outside, it's just like, you realize how much you've been missing when you're out for a walk. It's like, oh, this is pretty enjoyable, because like, it might not be natural for you to just head outside, go for a walk, clear your mind and relax. Because as mentioned again, like, when I'm doing hobbies like martial arts, exercise and cooking, that's kind of like actively doing something. And then when I'm going outside for a walk, it's just like clearing my mind. It's like clicking a reset button on my mind. Like, that's it. And then when you come back inside, you're like, oh, life's not too bad.
You reminded me of something else, and I think it links back to this topic of switching off. That part of the thing that I enjoy about going and being around nature. So say if I am stressed about work, I might go for a walk, I might pop outside or go to the local park and be around nature, and I'll be around a tree and I'll think, you know what, that tree's been around forever. You know, and it's still here. And I think about the things that are automatically, like, you know, grass is automatically growing around me. The world is going on. And I think it gives me some perspective, which is something else that helps me switch off. So nature, I think, helps me do that. Because it reminds me as well of another space that I know my mum is able to relax, because she's very, like, sort of has a very stressful job, but she can always relax on an aeroplane. And I think a lot of people have that experience as well, because, like, you know what, I'm here for the long haul, like, and lots of people enjoy that. So, and like I mentioned about my life, how I have this rule that once Claire's home, I'm not working, like, that's just the rules. So I've kind of created this boundary in my life, and it makes me feel okay about not working. So maybe, that's something that we can do, is things that set rules around when we, kind of doing things that make it so we feel comfortable not working, and placing boundaries around things, and also just having perspective and realizing we don't need to be working all the time. The world is a big, interesting place, and that thing that we're worried about and that task that we're obsessing over, in the grand scheme of things, maybe it isn't that important, and maybe it's okay to just chill out.
Setting rules around things, I think, is a really good and a very easy thing that people can do. Is that you almost, put in a few rules into place and say, I do not do this thing at this particular time. And that's it. No questions asked.
No compromises. Just say it, and then draw the line. And then I agree with, like, just get rid of a magnifying glass you're putting on your workload, your tasks. Once you get rid of that, as Rachel said, you can see how big the world really is. Quick tips on switching off, relaxing, shifting your thoughts, your actions, the direction of yourself away from your workload, work tasks. So what I would suggest heavily is just a simple practice of when you get to bed, when you're trying to get to sleep, focus on your breathing, because through that, you're putting your mind away from your task. And it's very simple. It's not something that's hard to do. Take 10 minutes before you go to bed, focus on your breathing, breathe as deep as you can. Like there's even YouTube videos. Like I remember like a guided meditation by Michael Seeley, one of them. So find one that just like kind of tracks or just guides you how to breathe, because then through that you get a better night's sleep, I think 100%. And then instead of going on your phone, you're just listening to guided meditation, and then through that you'll get a peaceful sleep.
Okay, so mine is pretty much stolen from Neil, so I don't know if this is going to be yours. And also it comes with a caveat that I am aware that not everyone can do this. Like depending on what your life is, not everyone can switch off, I think is the reality, because different people have got different lives. But my tip is let yourself be a child and treat yourself like you're a child. I think that's something that's come out of our conversation, and it's something that I do in my life. Like I said, I'm not afraid to play a game that is designed for 8-year-olds. I will because playing means that we've got something to be excited for and a reason to switch off. Daanish talked about doing martial arts, which could be a form of play as well, and you've got then something exciting to look forward to and a reason to switch off. And you're just taking that pressure off yourself that you don't have to be productive all the time. It's okay to play. So just try and channel your inner child and do something that brings you joy for no reason at all.
Strong point.
I love it. There's a really nice paper. I can't remember who it's by, but there's a really nice paper about. Again, it's about stimulating creative thinking, but I think in this regard, it can just be creative thinking in terms of how to switch off. And they've got two groups of people, and one of them they say you've got the afternoon off. What do you want to do? And the other group of people they say you've got the afternoon off. What do you want to do? And imagine you're 7 years old. And the people who imagine they're 7 years old think of way more creative things that they could do, whereas the ones who are just adults think like, I'll catch up on emails, or I'll do this, or whereas the 7-year-olds are thinking about all of these things that they would do. So that is another way, a really simple way. I really love that idea of you can actually manipulate your brain into thinking in different ways. So just by saying, okay, what would I do if I was a child? Like, what ways can I play as if I were a child? And that will, again, it's giving you the permission to do it. It's giving you permission to do those things. I love that. Love that. And that's a good time to plug the podcast. Serious Leisure. What is Serious Leisure? What is the Serious Leisure podcast, folks?
So it's literally breaking down the hobbies. If you give it a listen, you can see the breakdown of how they interact with a hobby. So if you, I suppose, in a sense, need guidance or just want to hear how people are enjoying themselves, having fun, rather than, I suppose, listening to very strict talks, you can actually listen to people enjoying themselves. Like, as we mentioned in this podcast, you're having fun with it. You can actually listen to people having fun with their daily lives. It's something I think you will enjoy if you're very curious about what can I do that I'll enjoy. It'll give you some tips, tricks, and it'll just give you an experience. It'll give you exposure to people enjoying themselves, and hopefully through that you can learn how to enjoy yourself as well.
So Google UE Serious Leisure podcast. Go and listen to it.
Bang.
Right then, human beings. I think we've solved all the problems of switching off then.
Yeah, we have. We'll get a check for like $1 million coming through.
I think we've solved it. I think everyone is going to feel immensely relaxed after listening to this.
Hopefully, that's the goal.
Well, on that note, I'm going to switch off.
Let us switch off.
Click the power button.
See you next week.
Bye.